Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming today. Today we've got two great speakers, Karena and Mike Tozer, talking about getting, helping training and finding work for people from marginalized and neurodiverse, i.e. people on the autistic spectrum backgrounds. Let me just move on. If you want to tweet about the event, you can do it at our Twitter handle, Sydney Testers, or the hashtag for tonight, SydTest, CKMT. Okay, so this is how we're going to kick off. Obviously, you've all arrived and networking has started. I'm going to do a short introduction for both people. And then about 6:15 or shortly afterwards, Catherine will come on for about 20, 25 minutes to talk about her work as in test ed, helping people from disadvantaged backgrounds into work in testing. And there'll be a short Q&A session afterwards. At about 6:40 to 6:45, we'll have Mike Tozer who runs a company called Exceptional, and we're talking about his work getting people from neurodiverse backgrounds and training them and helping them into testing and the kind of skills that they provide. Okay. So please allow me to do a description of Sydney Testers for those of you who are here for the first time. We're a group of volunteers who organize testing events in Sydney, talks, social events, panel discussions, that sort of thing. We organize monthly talks and socials. Basically, we're volunteers. We do it really because we love testing and we want to have a better Sydney testing community. So we've had a wide range of local and international speakers. People like James Bark, Michael Bolton, Trish Koo, Richard Bradshaw, Anne-Marie Charette, Rich Rogers. If you want to get involved, we're always looking for people to help out, especially on the event side. Or if you're interested in speaking, let us know. So just some testing news. We always have a section that talks about what's going on. We have three conferences that are coming up on this and the other side of the ditch. Test Bash Australia taking place in Sydney at the 19th of October. We have We Test, that's from Sydney Test, that's from Ministry of Testing, a British company, that the first time they're coming to Sydney. Great lineup at that one. We Test New Zealand, taking place in Auckland and Wellington. That'll be in November. Australian Testing Day is run by the Melbourne-based team meetup. They're going to be speaking on, doing an event here on the 24th of August in Sydney and the 8th of November in Melbourne. They're also looking for speakers at the moment, so you can apply to their CFP. So other meetups that we help to promote, the Quality Engineering Group, that's run by Anne-Marie Charette, and the Ansarada Sydney Quality Assistance Group, that's run by Primchek, a member of this group who's just started it up. And so the more groups there are, the more events there are, the more we think testing will get better here, and the more we have a vibrant testing community. So it's all good. And thanks to our hosts at ThoughtWorks, without whom we couldn't put this event on. So description of our two speakers tonight. First one is Karena. She's the founder of Test Ed, the training company that she'll be discussing, and the managing director of Endpoint Strategy. She's had 14 years of consultancy, new business development in the IT training industry, infrastructure, software development, and business skills to small and enterprise level businesses, well, small to enterprise level businesses. And a description of, short introduction to Mike Tozer will be coming on second. Mike and his wife, Helen, co-founded the first non-profit in Hong Kong focused on the genetic condition Fragile X. He's worked for 11 years in agile teams with Crossroads Foundation, a non-profit that connects businesses with resources for non-profit partners. And he also founded Exceptional, which he'll be talking about tonight, a technology services firm that provides exceptional outcomes for its clients and employs people with autism. Okay. Without further ado, please can I invite Catherine? Thank you. Just give us a second while we're setting up.
You always got this fear you're going to just forget everything as soon as you get up, don't you? So my name is Karena, and I'm the founder of both a community project, I guess a passion project of mine called Test Ed. Yeah, please. And essentially what Test Ed is about is providing, do I have to hold it? Test Ed about is providing, there we go. Okay. Test Ed is about providing training for unemployed and marginalised 18 to 24-year-olds, and primarily for employment in high-tech companies, in IT jobs, and usually the type of IT jobs that are the purview of university graduates. Whoops, sorry. Our core mission is we want to challenge the status quo of how people are educated. My background briefly is my training background is in two major areas in community. I've done community work with street kids and homeless. I've done training them up on building houses, on drama projects, on life skills, on religion, on cultural studies, and a whole bunch of stuff like that for a number of years. And in the training space, I've been working in soft skills, communication, IT, and test training skills. I fund this program for myself, and it's driven mainly because I see a major problem in Australia, in fact the rest of the world too. And the major problems I see is three things. I see a problem with a kind of an education which is about the more you pay, the more you stay, the more you pay. I also see a problem with charging young people a lot of money to get a higher education, particularly if you've got young people who are trying to get for university here in Sydney. It's expensive on them, and it's also expensive on their parents for supporting them. And I just don't feel that education should charge so much, because it takes a lot of freedom away from people. And particularly, I find that it's not particularly relevant, and that it takes too long to get a lot of people in higher education into full-time employment in jobs related to what they actually study. So the mission of Test Ed, we've only been running since this year. It's an ongoing project that I've run before for a large social enterprise in IT, but we have certain goals. You may not be aware of it, but in the city areas, it's about 10 to 13% of young people below 25 are unemployed. About 18% of them are underemployed. In other words, only about 20 hours of work. Combine that, you've got anywhere about 28%. And then you've got people in the regional areas, those young people are unemployed about 26 to 28%. So it's a really huge issue. Not only that, we've got actually a huge number, 25%, that disengage with school in a very quick time. So that's another issue. We look also, there's another basic goal with our program is bringing value to the community. For where I come from in my culture, Maori culture, it's being human is about being in a community. To create a human, you have to have community work. So the project I do is very much in supporting and nurturing the IT startup community, because that feeds on to the rest of the IT ecosystem. And another key thing is that I've got is break limitations that these trainees have of themselves and other people have of themselves. So we've had occasionally, actually we only have one autistic so far, but the assumptions made around him was that he wasn't capable of learning anything in IT at all. 2.5 years of unpaid work and labouring work. We've had people who have tried to commit suicide, and we've had people who don't speak at all, people from migrants, but just a whole array of different people. So one of the things, when we first started this, which has started with the social enterprise, the first pilot we did is that we had a particular challenge to validate whether or not this was an effective program. I'll be brief on this because I've talked about this before, if you've ever listened. But we wanted to take a number of trainees, train them up in 8 weeks, and then take them to Suncorp and see how they compared with university bachelors of engineering, IT engineering. Those kids have had 3 years at least in IT engineering course, plus they've done a postgraduate course in software tests, academic software tests training as well. And the goal was to see whether or not they could win a level 1 system engineering job at Suncorp. The outcome was those kids outperformed the university grads. After 8 weeks, they were ranked at level 2, which means they didn't need to go on a graduate program. They could start straight away. Half of the kids got offered jobs for $65K and they didn't have any degree. We had also the test leads said they did double the productivity of the test leads. They introduced 3 new ways of doing QA that Suncorp adopted. And they didn't slow down project velocity. We got we got everybody in a job within 4 weeks, easy. It didn't take much. And including, and now young David here is working in Qantas in a highly technical role. And I mention it because his parents didn't think that was possible. Whoop. Sorry, I'm not very good at the clicker. And the key, one of the key things about test ed that I feel passionately about is breaking through limitations. I say that we put a lot of limitations on ourselves and we put a lot of limitations on other people. Partly, I blame the education system. I think it was founded, if you look at that little factory over there, people seem to forget that the education system was founded on the meat factory process. Grade A meat, grade B meat, grade C meat. It's not a process that develops human beings, happy, healthy, well-grounded human beings. In fact, it is a process that actually gets in the way of growth. So I'm looking at, we had a few examples, right? I've mentioned David, but we also had a guy who came from a family of 3 generations of unemployed people who had never got a job, who was extremely shy and couldn't speak and wanted a tech role. The limitation he faces, most people assumed he could never do that because people are either good communicators or not. It only took 2 weeks training and he was great. He came in at 7 o'clock in the morning, an hour training in the morning. 1 week on the IT support desk and he had a job at Tyro under David, lovely David in the customer support area. In fact, we had 2 people we put over in Tyro, the customer support area. We've had lots of different examples of that, but it's breaking through the limitations that they've got. This is going to be a fire hose very quickly of some of the kind of work that the guys do. Okay, it's very fast. So, for example, some of the things we do with the kids, we say have 30-minute challenges. This 30-minute challenges is make for me a bug report checklist on a good bug report. This was a 30-minute challenge for making a test plan, primarily because I don't like really long-winded test plans. I just never have seen anyone from a recruitment business ever read them. So 1 minute, 1-page test plan. I don't believe, I'm a recruiter, but I don't believe in resumes at all. I think they're a waste of time. What I do is I get the guys to make online portfolios that demonstrate their skills in coding and give examples how they write bug reports and test plans and stuff like that. So for example, they have a lot of code projects and in it, they'll show you how they write the code so you can look at it and then you also can play with what they made. Working fast and smart is about heuristics and models and be able to think quickly and be agile and also different ways of documenting things so be faster, smarter, sharper. This one was a threat model that they made for one of the clients and they found how to take out the whole database. It was great. We also use a lot of mnemonics to memorize things. That one on the right we made up, which was radar on how to read requirements well, read anything well, precisely and quickly. And the other side we adopted from Association of Software Testing, who are fantastic on how to replicate a bug or what do you do with a bug. Okay, there's heuristics. We love our heuristics. Heuristics on API testing, tools that the guys have picked up and learnt, different ways of learning about stuff. As I said, this is a fire hose. An example of their bug report, an example of how they manage and track stuff. We had a really fantastic project. It actually added 3 weeks to the program, but I thought it was really worth doing, which we were going to do an accessibility project for Fairfax. Awesome stuff. So we ran around like mad things, talking to people who are disabled, talking to disabled testers, doing research at different UI companies and a whole bunch of other stuff. It took it 3 weeks. And what we produced is some mnemonics on cards. We've got about 10 of them. There's an example of 3, that's front and back, so that they could do the project. The project was supposed to take 3 to 4 weeks. It only took 5 days. And they called them the A-team. We also, because they are doing real world projects, we always want them to hit the road running fast, that they aren't going to slow anyone down. They're actually going to bring value. So we actually navigated all the different major points of a project environment world and how you'd handle it, you know, who you talk to, what you do around test environments, access, a whole bunch of different areas like that. And we made some cheat cards and business size that they could quickly look at so they could ask intelligent questions and stuff like that and start learning it off by heart. Again, tools on how to communicate projects, tools on quick tools and mnemonics on how to think quickly. Think about where your head's at and when you're sort of discouraged and stuff like that. Quick, simple tools to manage your day and time because things are changing and juggling. Okay, so that's all well and good. So what does that matter to you as testers? Well, the primary thing, I remember, I don't know how many people went to the quality engineering meetup last week. 1, 2, 3. Well, I wasn't surprised, actually was surprised that a lot of the conversation, of course, was talking, you know, shift left, of course, and quality engineering and testers, get rid of testers and automation, everything. I didn't agree with that one. And a whole bunch of stuff. All that pointed to the fact that IT is always a changing place and we always need to be learning. So what I wanted to share from our time, because I think the key thing you've got is we do accelerate kids into the IT market fast. What I want to share is some of those takeaways about what we do to make that accelerate happen. And I choose marginalized people because I figure if they can do it, there's no excuse for anybody else. Okay. Oh, that's what I was talking about. Some of the global trends, for example, from Forbes, I'm not sure how well that is. Speed will be new accuracy blockchain. In Sydney, from a recruitment point of view, I still have people talking about API testing, shift left, quality engineering, faster, smarter, sharper, communication skills around that, large enterprises being scared by smaller fintechs and stuff like that to go into microservices, that kind of trend. All right, those are the 7 takeaways. Let's move on. You can read about it later. The first one, though, I want to talk about is education requires people who have industry experience. Now, so part of my experience is 14 years in the IT training space, okay? In the IT training space, we have one rule about a good trainer. It is a good trainer will train people. A bad trainer will train courses. A good trainer, a good industry professional knows answers the questions that you don't know to ask. An industry professional who's a good trainer will tweak and shape the content of their class to the needs of the people in it. That's why it's smarter. Okay, and they know what they're talking about. Before I started some of this project, which started in 2012, I took a year off to do some research. I talked to about 50 different companies. I did some work for UTS and asked them to sort of change what they were doing in enterprise testing, a whole bunch of stuff. But one of the things I did is I had a look at those industries that were engaged industry professionals as trainers and those that didn't. Okay. Academy Interactive, it's an awesome organization, by the way. Before the kids have finished their programming, for those young people who finish their program, 98% have got a job. That they make those, all the arts and the software development for Marvel movies and Happy Feet and all that kind of stuff. It's amazing. Tractor, which is a graphic design thing, same thing. Within 2 months, as well as General Assembly, within 2 months, 90% of those people on their programs are into jobs. Now, compare with universities, on average, it's 4.7 years to gain a full employment related to their degree, okay? You got major long-term debt on one side, you got hardly any on the other. One of the things that really shocked me was how is it those kids in the first pilot, the university engineering, IT engineering kids, how is it they didn't have the technical skills right for the job? They knew the company, they'd known about it for a year. How did they not know what it is that the skills are needed for the job? What was that about, you know? And because and I did speak to one of the lecturers from UTS and he said 2 things. One, The skills required to get a good grade in the exams are not the skills required to get a job. And number two, I can't remember number two, I'll come back to it. Lengthy training period. You learn from industry's professionals because, as you can see, they connect the dots. They will tell you what content to learn. And secondly, from a training background, you've got to understand something. Education is a business, whether it's a government-run organization or if it's a private-run organization, it's a business. And the business model, I say, that you have to watch out for is the more you stay, the more you pay. Because when you have content that bloats a course or stuff that's irrelevant or high-level stuff that you're never going to use, one, if you're never going to use it, you're going to lose it, so it's wasted money and time. And two, it actually gets in the way of stuff that matters. Okay, so work out what we need to learn with the advice of people who have recognized the industry as great. So we use people like James Buck, Anne-Marie Charrett, Trish Koo, Katrina Clokey, etc. All these people that I've made friends with, the best in the industry. And if you don't, it's overly costly with time and money. I love this quote. I don't expect you to learn all that because it's just like explodes your brain. But the 3 R's, if you're going to learn something first before you dive in and spend a lot of money on anything, is research the market that you want to get into. What's the landscape of it? What's the trends? Who are the people to pay attention to? Who knows what they're talking to? If you pick a company you really want to look at, then look and see what kind of market problems they're trying to solve in the marketplace, what kind of journey they're on, what they're about, what is the problems that they face to solve the problems that they solve, what kind of challenges they've got. And once you've, if you go to an interview or anything like that, then know some core key things about what things look like. What kind of test plans do they use? What kind of documentation do they do? How do they learn about the customer? What's their development trade-offs? How do they develop the main product? What's the problem scape? All that kind of stuff. Okay. Other major area you've got to focus on, of course, is soft skills. Soft skills are hard, you know. In the time that I was looking at those companies, on the left-hand side, I came up with those kind of things I wanted to have covered: problem solving, presentation, requirement, etc. And when we did Suncorp, they had a really nice list, and I stole some of them and shoved it on there. Okay, really good. Now, I'm Maori, and I've got to say a lot of what I do is influenced by my culture. In my culture, learning is very similar to a process of eating. We use the human body to remind us of certain kind of things that we hold true. For us, the upper jaw represents all those laws and principles and concepts that are solid and infinite, and the lower jaw is the expression of those concepts. I'm not going to go into it, but example is respect. Respect is an esteem of another person. An expression for a British might be having kids look down, whereas a Maori, the expression of respect is to look down. So we have a concept and we have expression. But we say that the process of learning is very much a process where you are taking things in, you're chewing them over, small bits of food at a time, processing it, giving it time to assimilate, and it becomes part of you. So it's very important about what you take in. So it's very strange. When you have a meal, you're not going to stuff your belly on Sunday night and eat anything until the following Saturday. You have to have small bites of learning. With a lot of the guys, I insist that they do a little bit of programming each day when they're completely new to it, not big chunks, which they want to do. Just a little bit each day as a regular habit. That gets quicker. I noticed Connor, for example, did it and he just flew right ahead, whereas the other guys were spasmodic, and you could really pick who was going to pick it up quick and who's not. Okay. Be timely. I tend to teach stuff, or when you learn stuff that you're going to use soon. There's this great show on TV called The Pretender, where, and there's other people who pretend that they're doctors and pilots, and how they survive and how they get away with it is they learn what they need to learn for the next day. Be timely. And break stuff down. Don't stuff yourself up. Don't pack yourself in. You're going to forget it if you do it. Just little bites at a time, regularly, and make sure it's the right food. You've got the right content. Okay. We'll move along from this, but here's the thing. When you strip all the fat off it, when you get rid of anything that's redundant, that's useless, then everything that you do learn matters, and you know exactly what you've got to work with and learn. The fourth major principle is don't go it alone. Coursera, Udemy, Udacity, they're all fantastic, except at least there's 80% drop off with all of them. And that's because when you are actually learning, there's going to be some changes happening. You're going to come up against your fixed mindset. You're going to lose confidence. You're going to say, I can't do this. Get in a group, get support, get in dojos, get in meetups, go on the free code camp if you're into IT, that kind of stuff. Learn in a group, learn in a community. You need, with the kids, I try to make a safe place for them to learn, okay? Because that is what opens them up to get ahead. Okay, I like my diagram. I think it's cool. Essentially, one of the key things I want the guys to know is that they need to bring value to the workplace to be valuable. So the value I bring is I provide free training to young employers. I pay for it myself. If you need a recruiter, let me know, by the way. And the money pretty much goes into this project. It is a passion of mine. And then the kids, in return, they provide free training services for the startups, because the startups have no money, no time, no patience. They're always pivoting. They're doing a lot of stuff that they know nothing about. They can support and help and build that community so they can grow into, you know, small and medium enterprises and maybe go to the big town. The small and medium enterprises and some of the big town people, they provide us projects once we sort of know what we're doing, and they evaluate us, which is great. And hopefully the big end of town will hire us and give us placement money to keep on going, which would be really great. And of course, the sunshine as a test community is fantastic. We have got such an amazing test community. In Sydney Testers, I've got a comment that we want to put a lot more in the education and use the LinkedIn group more. Please go onto it and ask questions about companies and anything. What's really great, I've noticed in our community, is we've actually got all resources and a lot of people aren't learning them, using them. Okay. The other most important thing is the projects have got to be real. We've got to have real world projects. They've got to be tangible and concrete. People learn when there's lots of things involved. If we're teaching soft skills, you have to have real world projects. If they're storming, forming, norming, performing, that storming part is when they're trying to work out as a team, there is conflict. They've got to learn how to get along with people they don't like at the time. They've got to learn how to get along with that one person who disagrees with the rest of them, or that you're the one person that everyone disagrees with. There's all those issues come up with real world projects, and they're also solving real world projects. And when they solve real world projects, they're engaged and they're motivated because what they do matters. You know, one of the companies, ZapDat, we found the way to completely take out everything in the database, totally destroy and rip it, go from a user to a big super user and go underneath. And it was wonderful. Not for that company who was an accountant and collects all your accounting details. It was awesome, you know, but it was great value, you know. So for disengagement or motivation, we've never had an issue because it's real. Right? Click. The last point, as I said, is we're always facing limitations, and I blame that, the education system. Sorry to be political, but I do. I blame a lot of that. I think it's changing a lot, particularly in the private sector and some of the school and the lower school sector. I think it's changing. But for one of the things we did was called productive failure. I don't know if you've heard of that concept, which is basically is that when, for example, we have a project or for a company, I don't go and teach them stuff. When we did Fairfax, I didn't teach them accessibility. What I did is said, here's the problems these people have. How would you solve that? And then they went away and they did research, and then I would be a critic. I'd tear it apart or I'd support it, and then they go away, rethink and rethink, etc. So productive failure is actually trying to work out that problem from your sketch and working it through to your ready, and it was all real. So they own every part of the project, you know. That's it. The only constant in life is change, and that's true. And for us, this is how we feel about learning. Learning is change. When you learn, you change as a person. The world for you can change, but more important, there's no real education that leaves you unchanged. Thank you. Hope that was useful.
Thanks so much to Catherine. Excellent talk. Thank you so much. Would you be willing to take a few questions and answers? Thank you. Has anybody got any questions? Okay, Anjuman.
Want to make recommendations of people who could potentially benefit from a program like yours. Just that.
I am changing how I'm doing it. I've worked out how I can scale up so that I can do, I'm not sure if you're interested, but what I'm going to do instead is 3 one-day courses during the month, one on enterprise skills like problem solving, collaboration, etc. One day a month for coding, another day for testing, and then every week dojos, 3 dojos. And then when we've got people who sort of sort out whether or not this is something they want to do, then the unemployed are going to be doing the startup projects where we integrate things. That way I can scale it up a lot more and faster, you know. So that's where I'm going next. But yeah, just go on the site, say you're interested in being part of that. The only thing I make as a thing that I might not accept you is if you are doing this because your parents are forcing you to do it or something like that. I'm looking for people. One of the key things that I think is very important is that you have a career that aligns with your nature and your talents and your skills and your interests. It just makes it, if from a recruiting point of view, when people don't have to lie about what they're doing, they're naturally, it's just finding the right fit. I always think of people like animals. You know, you're going to have an eagle in the sky, you're going to have a rabbit in a hole, you're going to have a fish in the water, you're going to have a cat in a basket. You know, put the right person to the right ecosystem and things work out well. That's the key thing. That's the reason why you do a lot of research on stuff, because once you work out the ecosystem, you know what to put it. In my culture, prior to where the Pākehā came over, I noticed when they first started coming over, there was a lot of concern because they saw things like mental illness, and they brought lots of diseases and stuff like that, and they were incredibly unhappy, and they didn't look really good, and the rest of it. And a lot of it we put down is because they didn't spend the time to put people into their right roles, you know.
Anyone else? Oh.
Okay. I was just wondering, what's the hardest thing to teach these people who haven't had like a lot of education? Is it the skills, or is it the attitudes, or what are the main challenges?
I like problems, actually. I really like them a lot. So whenever I have a problem, I get kind of excited about it, particularly if someone can't solve it. It makes me feel really charged. I can't say that really had any major problems. I don't actually, here it is. It's not a problem with the kids. It's a problem with people around them. Okay. So do you mind if I talk about you, David? Cool. I found the biggest problem I had was with his family. Because his family assumed that he was unintelligent, you know, and that's really frustrating. And you can give them all the evidence in the world. You know, he's in Qantas, he's doing technical testing, he's doing API testing, he's doing test automation in Test Cafe, he's doing exploratory testing. You know, he found this major, you know what I mean? Awesome, okay? But all they see is, okay, this kid was doing 2.5 years of manual work and he can't possibly do this. And then the other thing is like he couldn't write. So I taught him how to write. So if I get angry and frustrated at people who just assume that someone can't do something and they never explored it. You know, they maybe look at the voice or they look at how they're speaking or something like that, but they don't really invest in. I don't know anything about autism. You know, I don't care. I just take people on a face value and look at what problems do. But I remember I hired him first because I was afraid about how he was going to be treated, and we needed tech and business support. And I remember I trained him up on sales, okay? Most people can't do sales, right? They're scared. I just treat sales like a, you know, a decision tree, you know, because it's like that. People seem to forget that human beings are just long iterations of organic algorithms. That's how I think of them, you know. So it's very easy. You could pick up the phone, they're going to make some kind of response, they're going to have some kind of emotional response. It's always the same. You pick which one they do. They give you've got certain choices to make. I taught him how to do this, and within a week he had made 3 appointments. That's unheard of in most recruitment, you know. But he just follows the rules, and it was easy as pie. So I don't understand how they had an issue. If you look at his blog, that's an intelligent blog. So I don't get it. I don't get people who put limitations on others without even, because they, and I get really carried away on this, because I think they can't do it, and they just assume that it's not possible because they can't do it, and they never even bothered to look to see how to do it. So I don't have a problem with the kids at all. I find it really easy, even if they don't have issues. We've had issues of suicides. I don't have an issue with that. I've tried that a lot of times when I was a kid too, so I know what that feels like. We've had mental diseases and anxiety and things like that. I know what that's like too, because I worked as a missionary and with homeless kids and shit like that, so I know what that's about. I don't have any problems with the kids. I have the problems with the people around them that assume they can't do that. Yeah, that's about it.
Thanks. Just one more question.
So I guess one of the things that you mentioned later on was around how you were planning to scale. And one of the things I would really like to see is for you to give us a bit of an example of how you can engage those big companies with, for example, examples like David, and bring other kids around there and kind of demonstrate what the process is.
One of the reasons why I needed to scale is because one of the large telcos came to me and said, after they'd seen some of the kids and what they could do, they said, give me 200 of those, please. Right. So I thought, okay, then I need to let the problem as I got is I need to scale. Okay. And to be honest, once I scale, I'm a salesperson at heart, which is really good in this thing. I haven't got a no, I haven't got a single no from anyone for any kind of support and help in some way. I really, you know, people at the guts of it, I think are good. You know, I think they want to help people. I think they want people grow, except for if you're in Trump or someone like that and just a monster. But I think most people, normal people, want people to grow. So I don't have really a problem. I think once I've got that down, it's a different pattern. So the first scaling, I'm going to take 20 to see if I've got a pattern. I did change the pattern from the first 2 pilots with this one. So I kept the class small because I changed some things around and tweaked it. So I've got that down, but then I've got to change the pattern again to scale it up. But in the marketplace as a recruiter, I can tell you when we put a job ad for a test engineer, we get about 300, okay? Not suitable. I can tell you right now, they're just not suitable. What I train is more suitable than what I'm getting. And they do have a lot of technical skills there, but there's no thinking, there's no problem solving, there's no collaboration, there's no flexibility, there's no opening, there's no listening, you know. So I'm optimistic, but I think once I'm getting going, I can find places for them. Yeah.
Once again, just a round of applause for Catherine, please. Thank you so much. Mike, would you like to come up to the stage? Okay. Just give us a second to set up, please. Catherine, can I just stop your share? Is that all right? Okay. Do your bit. Catherine, well done. I would like that. Thank you. Thanks so much. Okay. I'll give you the mic. I'll say how this. I'll give you the microphone. Awesome.
That one there?
She has to
Yeah, switch off. There you go. Okay. Actually, let me just. Sure. Our second great speaker tonight, Mike Tozer from Exceptional. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Paul. I might just move this over here. I prefer to hold the mic. Yeah, thank you, Catherine, for that. That was very fascinating for me to hear a bit more about what you're doing. Catherine and I are actually both based in the same building over at Fishburners, so it's been great for us to connect just quite recently. And I hope some of the things I'm going to share tonight will complement and yeah, give you a bit more of an understanding of what we're doing. So yeah, I'm the founder of Exceptional, as Paul just explained, and we'll get to that number in a moment. First question for all of you. Hands up, who enjoys job interviews? From the perspective of a candidate, someone who's being interviewed. Okay, is that a hand or a pizza? Okay, two down the front, one over here. Okay, so the majority of people in the room, I take it from the lack of hands, don't enjoy job interviews. But great to hear that you do. What is it you do enjoy about job interviews? Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so Exceptional focuses on the unique strengths of people with autism, and they particularly find job interviews challenging, not in every case, but if you are on the autism spectrum, it is 12 times harder for you to get a job than the rest of us. The unemployment rate and the underemployed adds up to around 65% for people on the autism spectrum. And yeah, that is a really shocking number to me, and one that's very personal to me as well, as my sister and my son are both on the autism spectrum. And particularly my sister, I've watched her as her older brother for more than 2 decades now, struggling to find jobs, to keep jobs. And there was this moment about 18 months ago when she was in a job, it was in a probation period, and she was let go from that position. Her contract wasn't renewed. And in the letter, when they gave her a referral letter saying some of the things that she did well, but they also mentioned one incident when she was working in a school as a cleaner. I mean, she's highly intelligent, and she was, in that case, very underemployed. But working as a cleaner, she was told one night to thoroughly clean the tables. And her other responsibilities were emptying the bins, wiping the whiteboard, other tasks as well. But because they said, tonight, Sarah, thoroughly clean the tables, she spent the whole shift just doing that. And they mentioned that when they came in the next day and all these other things weren't done in this letter. And as an older brother, this made me really angry because I know my sister so well. I know that she follows instructions very, very literally and very logically. And if you can understand and embrace that, you can really use her strengths. And right there and then, when I heard that, she's actually in the UK, there wasn't too much I could do in that particular situation. But instead, I decided at that moment, I wanted to start a company that embraced the strengths of people like my sister and led the way and showed other companies that things could be done differently. But in that moment, I wasn't quite sure what this company was going to do. But actually, about 2 weeks later, I was watching this TV show that a friend recommended to me, which there's since been an Australian version. But this was the UK version called Employable Me, following people on the autism spectrum and other neurological conditions in their job hunt. And this chap is called Brett. And Brett was placed with a computer-aided design firm in the UK called Peacocks. And this computer-aided design firm is about 100 years old. It's hard to grasp how a computer-aided design firm could be 100 years old, but apparently they transitioned from more manual manufacture of prosthetics into designing by computers, and then they used that skill to really rebrand themselves. But he was placed as a software tester. And you could see as the TV cameras were following him that it was almost a favor for the show that he was placed there. And yet a month later, he stood up in a room like this in front of all the staff and gave a talk about how much he was enjoying the work. And then his manager got up and spoke about how amazingly Brett was doing on the job and how he'd knocked it out of the park. His manager was in tears, sharing about the incredible success of this guy. And yeah, he was just one person in this big firm, but it just really clicked for me. I thought, wow, what would a whole company made up of people like Brett, of people like my sister, who were embraced in a new way for those strengths that I knew were there, rather than, as so often in the disability world, you focus on challenges. Yeah, my son had a meeting yesterday with my wife for an hour and a half, 7 people, his teacher, the principal, pediatrician, therapist, all talking about his problems. And they're trying to help him. But what gets me angry is that they rarely talk about his strengths, the things that I know he and my sister and Brett can do as well. So that sparked this moment in me that became the idea of exceptional. And I've worked particularly in Hong Kong in the IT field for the majority of my career, working in agile teams, building software. The biggest system I worked on was a system to connect the private sector with the United Nations system of organizations. So it was about 23 different organizations across 70 countries. And that was great fun. But it took about 5 years, that particular project. And I had a barbecue when I was with some of the people we worked on that project with, just soon after this TV show. And I was telling them about this idea. And each of them said to me 2 things. One was, I hope I can remember these 2. One was, that's a great idea. We'd love to see that thrive and help you. And the other thing they said was, we know someone you should talk to. There's someone in my work or someone else I know in the IT field. And I started to take these meetings. And we didn't even have a name then. It wasn't even a registered organization. But I started to get people offering work to us. And so, yeah, I stepped out and started employing our first staff. And we began undertaking different projects, particularly for digital agencies. And we got one early client in the US as well, a digital agency that's building software for Apple, for big universities in California, and they took us on as their testing partner. And yeah, that was the early start. But within the first 2 months, one of the big 4 banks in Sydney came to us and said, we would like access to the talent pool that you've untapped. And my first reaction was, well, we don't do that. We don't. At that time, we weren't placing people externally, and I said, that's not what we do. And they kept pushing and saying, we really want to do this. Surely you've trained up your staff. Can't you use that training material and send some of your candidates towards us? So yeah, we almost started that by accident, but it went so well because they were really understanding this phrase, the autism advantage, this kind of unique, and often, not every case with people with autism, but in certain cases, there's a real alignment with some of the strengths that are needed for work in IT and testing in particular. And yeah, one of the candidates during that program, he'd had yeah, some great qualifications, but he really had super low confidence and really struggled with the interview process. So part of what we did as well was to help put him through a series of activities, so much more task-based assessment rather than face-to-face questions. You know, a lot of cultures, face-to-face is a sign of trust, but particularly in the therapy world, they're now seeing the importance of going side by side with someone. So a lot of therapists now will go for a drive in a car, or they'll go for a run if someone's into fitness, and being alongside somebody actually enables them to open up more. And so we're using things like that, techniques like that, to help our candidates to really thrive. And this one chap was working on an activity that we were putting the candidates through, which is a piece of software called the Triangle Program. And you put 3 sides of a triangle into this software, and it outputs the type of triangle that those 3 sides represent. So if it's a 3 and a 3 and a 3, you have an equilateral triangle. If you have a 10 and a 1 and a 1, you can't join those sides together, so that's not a triangle. So this software is meant to do that, and they had to come up with test cases. And I was doing a bit of preparation the night before, and one book I was reading said, you know, if you're doing this program for NASA or for you know, an airline where you've got to map triangles to the Earth, it's very important you consider spherical geometry. You know, what a triangle looks like at the North Pole is very different from what it looks like on 2-dimensional space. But that book also said no one will come up with this unless it's a job at NASA or unless you tell them to consider this. And yet this candidate put his hand up and almost apologetically said to me, you know, Mike, do we need to consider spherical geometry in this case? And I picked myself up on the floor with this creative thinking. I was seeing this chap going through, and I pulled over the hiring manager. I made him tell him again. And he was one of the people that ended up getting a job with that bank, and has since been promoted, and has since come up with a major algorithm change that's been implemented across the whole bank, and into their tech partner in India as well. So yeah, it's been great to see him really thrive. And he said to me, I never thought I would get a job with a major firm, a household name, yeah, at all. So yeah, it's great to see that happen. So I've mentioned the autism advantage. And what do I mean by that? Well, these are some of the strengths that align well with autism. There are others as well, but these are ones that work particularly well with our customers, the companies we're working with. So things like sustained concentration. You know, working on startups and innovative products most of my life, I happily work you know, crazy long days at certain times, but I'll be the first to admit that, you know, come 3 a.m., my concentration really starts to dip down, even sometimes by like 4 p.m. In the afternoon, I need a sugar something. But yeah, our candidates have an incredible ability. One in particular will just work through every break if I don't, you know, if I'm not really firm in getting him to take breaks and lunchtime. It's incredible concentration. Creativity and novel thinking. You know, one of our team was telling me he thinks of numbers in terms of 3D objects. He thinks of prime numbers in terms of spheres, and he was telling me all these ways he visualizes numbers. And I just couldn't get my head around the way he was describing them, but it was clear to me this was a brain that is needed in the workplace, is so valuable, and yet we're just touching the surface in terms of utilizing the strengths of the around 50 million people globally who have autism. They often have a unique expertise in certain areas in general, but not in every case. They don't make good generalists. They make it can be very specific in certain areas, and incredible attention to detail, which obviously works well with software testing. One of our candidates was testing a payment portal, and yeah, quite a few other people had worked on this system and realized that for large numbers, there was a problem in the system. But this person worked out that actually there was a difference. It was around like 7 or 8 figures. There was a difference at a certain level for even numbers, and a different difference at a different level for odd numbers. And the rest of our team were like crowding around and you know, realizing what he'd worked out and how it was going to help to yeah, show the gaps in this particular system. But yeah, that attention to detail is absolutely incredible. And then high integrity as well, a real loyal commitment to the team, to the company. A friend of mine, his son is on the autism spectrum. He's at university. I won't give my opinions on university for tonight, but a discussion to be had. I think I almost gave my opinion then, but I'm on most things I'm more grey and down the middle, and not very highly opinionated at different ends. But this chap is at university, but he's myopically focused on his studies. Like, he's going to get the best grades that he possibly can. Career fairs, work experience, no. Internships, no. Visiting employers, workplaces, you know, that's all off the cards for him, because he's that focused. And all of us, most people know that he's going to lose out. He's going to, you know, need extra help by the time he gets to the end. It's good to be thinking ahead. But when he's on the job, he's the one that's going to be so focused on the job, while there's other people potentially, you know, 18 months down the line are thinking about what's next, starting to think about the future. And so many of the people within our pool of candidates are really loyal and really focused in a long way on the job. And our customers that we're now recruiting for are really excited by that long-term commitment. And so I've talked a lot about the autism advantage. Peter Thiel has been talking about it in Silicon Valley for about 10 years, trying to get people to wake up. And now some companies are starting to. The bottom 3 are examples of large technology companies that are now targeting around 1% of their employees as people on the autism spectrum, which is about in line with the general population. So it's not exactly a high standard, but they're at least recognizing that there's a need. The ones at the top are all focusing much more heavily. They're smaller companies that, like us, are really seeing this as an area to be focused on. NeuroWorks is a network that we're part of around 30 companies globally that are embracing the autism advantage. And it actually includes not just tech companies. There's a car wash in Florida that is knocking out the park in terms of performance as a car wash, because their schedule goes 8:59, the shutter goes up. 9 o'clock, the lights come on. 9:01, this happens. It's very, very rigidly planned, and that routine works so well with people on the spectrum. Whereas the car wash down the road, maybe 9:30, things start to get going, and it's, you know, and they're following the safety regulations to the letter. They haven't had a single incident, so they've negotiated their insurance to come down, and all these factors have led to incredibly high performing car washing business. Who would have thought? There's in Silicon Valley, not Silicon Valley, in LA, there is a film studio that's embracing the strengths of people with autism to help with making movies. So there's a real overseas network that we're tapping into, and things are just getting started here. I've used the word neurodiversity a few times. That includes people with autism, but also people with other neurological conditions, ADHD, dyspraxia, dyslexia. And the Harvard Business Review has called this whole group of conditions a competitive advantage, and that needs to be better embraced. And that's right where we are. But I also like reminding myself and others that autism is so different for everyone. You know, each individual experiences it in a different way. It's called a spectrum for a reason. And this is one particular person. I really appreciated a blog post I read a couple of weeks back. So someone was describing their particular circumstance, and they said, yeah, long streams of information. If you talk to me for several minutes, they really struggle with that. Conversations are harder and more stressful, more confusing than large algebra problems for them. But she also underscored that it doesn't mean she doesn't enjoy social interactions, just they're really, really hard. And often people on the spectrum, this person in particular, thinks very visually in terms of pictures. You know, I mentioned someone thinking in numbers, that's often a characteristic, and sounds as well. For my sister, she was only diagnosed about 5 years ago, in her 30s. And the most freeing thing for her was that she realized she could understand how difficult she finds sounds. There's a faint hum coming from somewhere over there. That would really frustrate my sister. And now she knows that. She knows when to wear noise-canceling headphones. And noise-canceling headphones is probably the one biggest adaptation that has made a huge difference for our team. And then allowing them to talk about that with their managers as well. This is why I need to wear these. This is how to get in touch with me if I am wearing them. And yeah, a few numbers. I've told a few stories. Here's some of the numbers from some of our partners. JP Morgan in the US has an autism hiring program, and they found that the staff were 50% more productive 3 to 6 months after being hired compared to the neurotypical staff in the same program. And so not just 50% more productive overall, but 50% productive and 6 to 12 times faster as well. You know, incredible difference. And it's not just them. Some stats, some ultra testing. They were comparing a project that previously had been done by IBM, and then their team were applied to it. And they saw an increase in the bug detection rate of 20%. And one of their customers described it as the best level of QA he'd ever seen in his 14 years of working in testing. So yeah, why aren't there more people thriving in the job market? I've mentioned my sister's challenges, and that's often the case with other people as well, particularly around the job interview, how stressful that can be. Sometimes also with things on the job, but particularly that face-to-face interview is really, really challenging. It's actually harder to get a job if you're autistic than if you're blind. You know, almost any other disability is still difficult. It's still higher than the general population with unemployment, but autism is the most challenging. So what are we doing? What can you do in your companies, in your work? Here's a few of the adaptations that we are seeing work really well. Yeah, one of the first areas we work on is in training. So training line managers, helping them to understand some of the experiences that our candidates go through, that we've learned, understanding about eye contact, not to judge someone as untrustworthy if they're often looking down, but to understand that's related to to how their brain works and to see the potential positives of that as well. And so, yeah, we provide that to our partners when we place people and to our own staff as well. Secondly, on recruitment, looking at ways to do job descriptions better. Yeah, I'm also not a big fan of job descriptions, but they're a necessary part of recruitment life. And yeah, one of our candidates said whenever he gets a job description, he has to pass it on to a family member to help them to translate it for him. And I said, well, what do you mean? What would be an ideal job description for you? And he says, oh, if it was charts and images, almost exclusively showing, you know, the flows of the organization, the flows of information. And I'm like, you know, wish every single job description I've ever read is almost 100% text. You might get a very, very, very carefully branded picture if you're lucky. But then because of that system, we're missing out on his brain. Not anymore. He's now been placed at a large financial organization. But yeah, really helping them from the inside as a autism advocate to change. The other big thing is work tasks. You know, some research out from Google a couple of years ago that showed that face-to-face questions, even some psychology tests, most of the things that recruiters are doing aren't well aligned with performance on the job. The one thing that's most aligned with performance on the job is doing the job. It's actually doing a sample task related to the work. And it's not always possible, particularly if you pick one and you use it the same with every candidate, and then it gets out there online, and then that makes it challenging to use that again. But yeah, trying to do that as much as possible is something that we're passionate about. And then thirdly, the onboarding process. We found that candidates perform better than the counterparts, usually after about, like JP Morgan, about 3 to 6 months. But that first 3 months can be really hard, particularly if we were with a firm this week that were really excited about hiring more people with autism, but we were talking about their onboarding process, and they had the first 3 days where you shadow an existing employee the whole time. As soon as I heard that, I thought, wow, I'd find that stressful to be like, you know, hovering on someone's shoulder the whole time. And yeah, it definitely wouldn't work for everybody. So we try and encourage people to think, you know, how can you vary things? And one thing that I'm starting to realize is a lot of these innovations that work for people with autism potentially could work for everybody else as well. So yeah, adapting how you onboard people works well for people with autism, but it works well for other people that don't like, you know, 3 days of intense job shadowing and prefer perhaps watching videos or reading material. You know, everyone learns in different ways. And I think that applies and should apply more to onboarding too. Similarly, discussing communication styles. You know, do you prefer text message or Slack? We're really looking a lot at a lot of the people we're placing them into activity-based, you know, hot desking environments and also agile environments. And yeah, I've had some stressful agile meetings in the past when you're like, you know, tell us what you've done today, and it's, you know, you're there in a stressful situation. So we've, in some cases, adapted agile to ways that work for online communication. So on a Slack channel, when I describe Slack, is everyone familiar with that as an instant messaging tool? A few nods around the room. So yeah, submitting by a certain time your report for the day, what you're working on, what you're going to work on next, any problems, to that channel by, say, 11 a.m. And then you've people that need a lot of time to think or want to get it out of the way early, they can submit to that in advance. So yeah, we're looking for little innovations like that. And the other one is social events. You know, we're at Fish Burners, and there's like 300 startups there, and everything's beer and pizza and come and pitch now and do this, and it's all like great for extroverts. And then I look over to Silicon Valley and think about a lot of the leaders of some of the biggest tech firms that actually aren't extroverts. And I think, wow, we've got to really adapt how we do these events. Yeah, and I'm a father of 2, and so when all the events are 6 p.m., when my child with special needs, that's his most stressful time of the day. Yeah, it makes it really hard. So think about how to make your events more accessible to different types of people and different times of the day is another key thing. I can't finish off without mentioning one particular major step in our company's journey. So I mentioned the UK version of Employable Me. There was an Australian version in April that was shown on the ABC here. I think there's at least one person in the room that saw it. Anyone else? Okay, a few people. I think it's still on iView if you're interested. I'm a bit biased, but I think it's one of the best things that's been on TV so far this year. I'm biased because me and Tim really is the star. I was just a kind of an extra. Had a brief part. How am I going for time, Paul? Doing okay? Okay. Yeah, I also think it's one of the best things on TV because we keep getting literally dragged into different companies all over Sydney where someone in the company has watched this show and is super passionate about changing their hiring practices, which is so exciting. And I've been some of the companies I've been into and tried to talk to them for an hour, and yet the power of TV to really demonstrate the problem of Tim. There's a clip that was watched by about 2.5 million people now online of where he was being trialed out in a firm in North Sydney to do games testing. You can see how in that clip, how he really struggles with communication, particularly with new people. And once he's much more established, he does a lot better. So yeah, that show, I was in one of the big investment banks this week, and somebody who's in charge of one of the divisions of the bank had seen the show and said, he knows lots of people with disabilities, but it touched him in a deep way because he saw afresh that behind physical challenges, there is often a hidden brain that has a lot of power and a lot of ability. So yeah, I encourage you, if you're not inspired by that, at least check it out. Check out the video, the clip on YouTube, and then even watch the whole show on. Well, there's three of them, and each of them was tracking somebody with disabilities in their job hunt. And yeah, that was actually how Tim came to our firm through that show, and we put him through a few different exercises to test out his skills. And yeah, now he's working for us, testing for a number of our customers. And I would also, yeah, being on TV in that instance has an incredible impact on a startup. It sounds like a kind of dream scenario, but also it's a way to lose a lot of sleep for a lot of time. So we had about 500,000 people watching the show on the night. And we only found out after it finished, while it was on, we were the #2 trending topic on Twitter. #1 was The Bachelor, one of those other shows. And most of the tweets were like, I can't believe people are talking about that when there's this amazing TV show on. So yeah, my phone, like literally smoke started to come out of it. I'd start replying to like Facebook messages, and then the emails were coming in and Twitter messages, and yeah, 500 inquiries, 48 hours. And our candidate pool, yeah, maybe we should be talking a bit more with Catherine, because it's now grown to over 200 people. And still more and more people from all over Australia are contacting us about opportunities. So yeah, it's a really exciting time for us to have both businesses and candidates that are starting to understand each other for the first time. And yet still only 10% of companies have some kind of management practice that is focused on, embraces people with neurodiversity. So I'll just finish up with a couple of lessons that we've learned. Some of them I've touched on already. The first one is when you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. So there's incredible differences, and yeah, we're learning to understand those, to embrace them. I remember for our first employee, when we hired him, I read a whole book about adaptations in the workplace that you needed to make. And the last chapter said, remote work solves almost all of these. If you allow remote work, that's great. So we set the whole model up and all of our tools so people could work from home and also remote, rural areas. And the first chap, when we employed him, he said, oh, no, I want to work in the office. I'm like, but what about the book? And so, yeah, now we've learned that actually, although, yeah, you allow noise cancelling headphones or ask about lights and sounds, but for some people, those things aren't a thing at all. And the other thing I've seen myself, and there's recent research from the autism community, is that the management needs are not greater, they're just different. So a lot of the people that we work with, they're very, very unsure. Is this going to double my job when I hire this person? But actually, it's just different. And like the same as I've managed people a lot in my career, and everyone has their different needs and different ways of communicating. It's the same. And yeah, I've mentioned already what works for people with autism works for everyone. And yeah, I really think we're barely scratching the surface in utilizing the strengths of people on the spectrum. Finish with a couple of numbers. One is the gap in technology projected by Deloitte in the next couple of years. And then that's the number of people in Australia on the autism spectrum. And our goal is by 2022 to carve out 1,000 jobs and internships for that group of people, and then potentially make even bigger impact on that 230,000 by working with other partners as well. So yeah, we're just launching a brand new exceptional internship program. And so if you're interested in hiring someone from this amazing talent pool, we would love to speak to you. And yeah, join us in helping change the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sir Michael. What a great talk. Thank you. If you've got any questions and any questions, well, you can ask them now. Okay.
Sorry. So what I like the line when you said what works for people with autism works for everyone. But autism itself is a spectrum, and if people with Asperger's, like Sheldon Cooper from the Big Bang Theory, or like the Rain Man, the Rain Man, yeah. And I believe people with autism can be varied across the spectrum, can be different. What the lessons you've learned, do they apply for everyone on the autism spectrum, or is it the same for everyone?
Yeah, interesting examples you gave. I'd say they were more up the savant end of the spectrum. And that's not everyone with autism, so I don't talk about that too often. But yeah, I think our lessons to conduct assessments of a workplace, lessons to ask someone how they want to be communicated with, those apply across the spectrum because they're a questioning stance. So yeah, I think things that I've said about the connections with IT, they definitely don't apply to everybody. In fact, my sister is really into the arts. She loves singing. She's in 3 choirs. Ask her anything about musicals. That's her kind of expertise area. Yeah, the Autism Society in the UK did a survey, and there was around 11% of people that had an interest or an ability in IT. But there was also another 11%, probably some crossover, into the arts. So yeah, I really believe people with autism can do anything like the rest of us. But yeah, there's certain areas where we're seeing a real alignment with IT.
I'm not sure if you're aware, but there was a young lady recently murdered in Melbourne, which is a sad story. But one of the articles I was reading was linking the murderer to suffering from on the autism spectrum. And how do you combat those negative associations or stereotypes of people being on the spectrum are violent or aggressive or suffering from, severe conditions that might cause them to go to murder? Is what the media is making these connections.
Yeah, that's a tough question and a horrible incident. And I've known of there's been a few high-profile things in the media recently. There was also a child that ran off and then had a fatal injury, and that is a potential. My son also often runs off, so you have to be aware of that. Yeah, I think combating things in the media, really, it's by making change on a grassroots level, by placing more and more people in workplaces, and it's by understanding and working alongside someone. For me, I have a real understanding and a real empathy because I know my sister for more than 3 decades. And so for me, that's the way to combat it. I mean, yeah, it'd be great to work with media companies to change those roles so that not every single person with autism is either dangerous or, an X-man, sort of, that kind of level of savantness. There's a whole lot of people in between. But I think the ABC show went a long way from the number of I probably had 100 conversations in the last month of people saying that show really changed their perception. The director, Kian, did an amazing job of understanding the 9 candidates. He spent 6 weeks with them. Tim became more comfortable with a microphone than I did, you know, when I first met him, because the director really helped to understand him. And so, yeah, I think shows like that spending an hour with someone, watching them on TV in a real life situation, I think are gonna change the public's perception.
Any other questions?
What you shared with us over here are saying more from the point of view of how amazing people can perform with very different abilities as well. But in your time with the work that you've been doing, have you ever found a set approach or process to train the employers to understand the needs and how they can adapt to hire people with these abilities, and you know, kind of the approach that they can take to make the environment more conducive for people like these?
Yeah, that's definitely something we've started to do. Yeah, really started by that first example I mentioned in the banking sector. Companies are now asking us, you know, we're interested in this talent, but we need help to do that. We need help both with training the hiring managers, with their peers, and then more broadly across the company. So yeah, now we're offering workshops that often will come in under the diversity and inclusion training bracket that our staff will run and help people to understand. Both hiring managers often will get people that have a friend or a family member who's on the spectrum who are interested as well, and make that broadly available across the company. And yeah, people are really, it's a really interesting time. I think partly sparked by this TV show. One of the companies we went into, they already had an internal working group of parents and people that were inspired to try and see change. And when they heard that we were getting started, it was a really timely match.
Anybody else have a question? Okay, well, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you very much. Before we go, I'd like to just give one last round of applause to Mike Tozer for his excellent talk. Thank you so much. And sorry, just do this quickly. And because I didn't do it at the beginning, but I do think it's important, we as a group think it's important, I just wish to acknowledge the custodians of this land, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and their elders past and present. I acknowledge and respect their continuing culture and the contribution they make to the life of this city and this region. I should have said that at the beginning, I forgot, I apologize. We'll be around till about 8 o'clock when the meetup officially wraps up. Please take advantage of the food that's on offer and the drinks, and have an opportunity to mingle and socialize. Once again, thank you so much to our 2 speakers, Karena and Mike Tozer. Good night, everyone. And Yeah, I'm quite bad
Yeah,
for that as well.
that's one of my.
I'm quite bad.
Yeah, like that's one of my personal pet peeves. It's like dot points are like slides of fruit. Yeah, you don't need balls of text. But that's just from a if you think of your slide deck as like a UI, you're trying to convey information in a approachable fashion. Yeah, so you can apply that cognitive psychology to slide design. Or it's like, how would you present this material to one of your candidates who can't process, who can't process long lines of text, because most people can't. Not just so that's probably one of my few criticisms. Like, Damien Conway has a brainstorming technique for coming up with your slide deck. So instead of coming up with your slides, you've got a download, or I can link to that as well if you want a refresher on it. I did some training with him on technical presentation skills, and his brainstorming technique means you don't, first of all, don't start with slides. Slides are overrated. You don't really need slides, but people start with slides. And then you want to iterate through your presentation. So his brainstorming technique is take pen and paper, and somebody taking technology, and you brainstorm everything you know about people. Because we're really bad at thinking of the top 5 things, but from a cognitive psychology point of view, we're good at picking out things we know from a list. It's easier to pick things from a list than it is to go, what's the top 3 off the top of my head. So you brainstorm everything you know about a topic. You then pick 5 of those things. And then ask, do these 5 things tell a story? Is there a natural narrative flow? Like, am I starting with the problem, the solution? Do they follow a story? If they don't, maybe take one, off that, and incorporate something else into it. And then you eventually pick each subtopic. Each subtopic you brainstorm everything you know about it, pick the top 5, you've got a narrative flow. You've got stories within stories. Stories are a way to information that has worked with where the written story is conveyed. Yeah. And so you're at a point now where your slides almost write themselves. You just need to put one word or one phrase to remind you of the story you're telling. And you've already got
That's my Spanish name. Sounds like she needs to sound very good. Virtually back at the the reason I raised it was people always think that autism is that but I haven't never read it. And I always think of autism as a whole spectrum. It's about a lot of the high functioning.
My uncle is and he works with very flexibly people down they can't help it. And so they just, at the end of the day, they just give in to bad behavior. Like one of his clients is completely addicted to McDonald's. When he goes to McDonald's, he gets 3 or 4 large bags, just for the sauce about the sugar. And people who process information are more likely to get, I guess, addicted to some of those behaviors. And he's not just taking into that type of behavior. And he's, he gave a bit away, and if you had one of the things, and out of the prevention rate, floating around that, I just been able to take on what you and one of
He's on medication actually, but adding to his weight, but it's difficult.
yeah.
There's a startup just over here that's trying to play around autism therapy. It's sounds all very hands-on. Come to the house, you need to go to a centre.
Yeah.
They're not even revealing what they're doing yet. But it's passing around trying to utilize the practice so you can really connect well with the device. It's absolutely something amazing at temple run. You can't hardly put better understanding anything he says. You don't call it non-verbal, just keep understanding.
Yeah.
Not communicate.
Yeah.
Amazing. I keep thinking like, surely we can come up with things on iPads or iPhones that are helping communication.
One of my takeaways from watching Tozer is that a lot of these people who came from pretty well-off families, they have that to be able to help their family. And I come from a lot of socioeconomic backgrounds. I know a lot of people who have struggled with something. They just not have the resources to be able to help maybe my own criticism that something that came was that it showed a particular box. So generally, like, yeah, fine.
Not quite like that. It's on top of each other.